Hi, I'm Mira. Welcome to another story. Let's see where this one takes us. The wind screamed against the shutters of Kieran's workshop, rattling the glass in its frame. Kieran hunched over their workbench, tools spread haphazardly across its surface, the pale glow of a sputtering generator casting long shadows around the room. A diagram of the artifact was pinned to the wall, a crude rendering based on distant observations, its etched patterns painstakingly copied by hand. The light from the generator flickered again. Kieran cursed under their breath and reached for a screwdriver, tightening the loose connection that had been causing the power to falter all evening. The storm outside was worse than usual, a constant reminder of the artifact's fading light and the looming threat it represented. For centuries, the artifact had been the village's protector, keeping the storms at bay. But now, with its power failing, the storms were growing more violent, and the village's survival was on a knife's edge. A sharp knock on the door startled Kieran from their work. They opened it to find Elder Thane standing there, their fur-lined cloak dusted with snow, their expression grim. "Kieran," Thane said, their voice low but firm, "we need to talk." Kieran frowned, but stepped aside to let the elder in. "If you're here to tell me to stop working on this, save your breath. Faith isn't going to fix the artifact." Thane closed the door against the storm and turned to face Kieran, their eyes calm but unwavering. "Faith has kept this village alive for generations," they said. "But even Faith must adapt to the truth. You've been studying the artifact for years. What have you found?" Kieran blinked, caught off guard by the question. "You actually want to know?" Thane nodded. "The storms are getting worse. The villagers are frightened. If you have answers, now is the time to share them." Kieran hesitated before gesturing to the diagram on the wall. "The artifact isn't just some mystical relic. It's a machine, advanced beyond anything we've ever seen, but it's breaking down and we don't have the knowledge to repair it." "Can it be stabilized?" Thane asked. "Maybe," Kieran admitted, "but that's not the real problem. The artifact wasn't designed to serve just us. It's connected to something bigger, something that's out of balance. If we want to fix this, we need to understand what that balance is." Thane was silent for a moment, their gaze fixed on the diagram. Finally they said, "Then we must find the answers together." The next morning the village square was abuzz with tension. The storms had claimed 2 more rooftops during the night, and livestock were freezing in their pens. The villagers gathered around the artifact, its light barely flickering against the grey sky. Thane stood before the crowd, their voice calm but commanding. "The artifact is failing," Thane said, their words drawing gasps and murmurs from the crowd. "And our faith alone will not restore it. We must act." "What are you saying?" a voice called from the crowd. It was Marek, one of the more vocal traditionalists. His expression was a mix of fear and anger. "Are you abandoning the old ways?" "No," Thane replied, their tone steady. "But the artifact is more than a symbol of faith. It is a gift. Yes, but it is also a responsibility. We have taken from it without understanding, and now we must learn what it needs to continue protecting us." Marek stepped forward, his fists clenched. "You would let this mechanic," he spat the word, gesturing toward Kieran, "tamper with something sacred? What if they make it worse?" Kieran stepped forward, their heart pounding but their voice firm. "It's already getting worse. If we do nothing, the artifact will fail completely, and the storms will destroy the village. You can cling to tradition all you want, but it won't save you." The crowd erupted into arguments, voices overlapping in a chaotic cacophony, then raised a hand and the noise gradually subsided. "Enough," they said, their voice ringing with authority. "This is not a debate. Kieran and I will examine the artifact. If we can stabilize it, we will. If not, then we will seek another way. But we will not stand idle while our home is destroyed." Marek's glare burned into Kieran, but he said nothing more. The crowd began to disperse, their faces etched with uncertainty. That night, Kieran and Thane approached the artifact. Its once dazzling light was now a faint, trembling glow, barely illuminating the swirling snow around it. Kieran adjusted their goggles and began setting up their equipment, their breath fogging in the cold air. As they worked, Thane knelt beside the artifact, their gloved hand resting lightly on its surface. For generations, we believed this was a gift from the heavens, they said quietly. Now I wonder if it was a test. A test we're failing, Kieran said without looking up, but maybe not for much longer. The first panel opened with a soft click, revealing the artifact's inner workings. Kieran's breath caught as they saw the intricate network of crystalline conduits glowing faintly within. "Let's see what you're really made of," they murmured, reaching for their tools. Thane stayed silent, their eyes reflecting the flickering light of the artifact. They didn't know what awaited them, but they knew one thing for certain. Faith and reason would have to walk hand in hand if the village was to survive. The artifact's internal mechanisms glowed faintly, casting Kieran's focused expression in a soft, ethereal light. They worked with precision, carefully weaving their tools around the crystalline conduits, trying to avoid disrupting the fragile balance within. Thane stood nearby, their breath visible in the cold air as they watched the intricate process unfold. "What are you seeing?" Thane asked quietly, breaking the heavy silence. Kieran glanced at them, a mix of excitement and apprehension in their eyes. This isn't just a power source. These conduits aren't distributing energy, they're exchanging it. It's like the artifact is negotiating with the environment, keeping everything in balance. "Negotiating," Thane repeated, their voice tinged with disbelief. "You're saying this machine communicates with the land?" Kieran nodded. "In a way, yes. It's regulating the storms, keeping the ecosystem in check, but something's throwing it off. Probably us." Thane frowned, their hand brushing against the artifact's cold surface. "We've taken so much from it without understanding. If it's truly alive in some way, then we've been treating it like a slave." The thought hung heavily between them. Kieran returned their attention to the artifact, scanning the conduits for signs of further degradation. A low hum began to build within the obelisk, vibrating through the frozen ground. "That's not good," Kieran muttered. "The energy build-up is accelerating. If we don't stabilize this, it's going to overload." Thane's eyes narrowed. "What do you need?" "I need to redirect the flow," Kieran said, pulling a small device from their toolkit. "But I don't have enough connections to balance the output. It's like trying to plug a dam with one finger." Thane looked over their shoulder at the glowing patterns within the artifact. "What if we don't just stabilize it? What if we restore the balance it's asking for?" Kieran paused, turning to them. "You mean let it stop serving just us? Share its power with the environment?" "Yes," Thane said firmly. "If the artifact is asking for balance, then that's what we must give it." The storm raged outside the village square as Kieran and Thane addressed the gathering of villagers. Lanterns swayed violently in the wind, their flames sputtering, but the crowd stood firm, drawn by a mixture of fear and hope. "This is the truth," Thane said, their voice carrying over the howling wind. "The artifact was never meant to serve us alone. It is not a god to be worshipped, nor a tool to be exploited. It is a bridge, a connection to the balance that sustains this land. And that balance has been broken." Marek stepped forward, his face twisted in anger. "And you think breaking it further will save us? You'd give up its protection, let it stop shielding us from the storms? That's madness." "The storms are the result of imbalance," Kieran interjected, their voice steady despite the tension in the air. "The artifact isn't punishing us, it's trying to warn us. If we restore the balance, the storms will stop. And if you're wrong," Marek spat, "what happens to us then?" Kieran hesitated, feeling the weight of the villagers' stares. "If I'm wrong," they said, "then we lose nothing because the artifact is failing anyway. But if I'm right, we save the village and the land it depends on." A murmur spread through the crowd, some nodding in agreement, others glaring with distrust. Thane raised their hand, silencing the voices. "This is not a decision to be made lightly," the elder said, "but it is a decision we must make together. Faith and reason must guide us now, not fear. I ask you to trust that we are doing this not to destroy what we hold dear, but to honour it." The murmurs quieted, replaced by a tense, contemplative silence. Finally, one of the villagers, an older woman with deep lines etched into her face, stepped forward. "I've lived through worse storms than this," she said. "If there's even a chance this can save us, I say we take it." One by one, others began to speak, their voices blending into a tentative chorus of support. Marek glared at Kieran and Thane, but said nothing further. retreating into the crowd with a scowl. Back at the artifact, Kieran and Thane worked side by side, their breaths fogging in the cold air. Kieran connected their device to the artifact's inner conduits, carefully adjusting its settings to redirect the energy flow outward. Thane chanted softly under their breath, a prayer, or perhaps a reassurance to themselves. As Kieran made the final adjustment, the artifact pulsed violently, its light flaring brighter than ever before. The ground trembled and the storm above them roared with deafening intensity. For a moment it felt as though the world might break apart. Then suddenly, the storm stopped, the wind died, the snow settled, and an unnatural stillness blanketed the valley. Above them, the sky shifted as the massive crystalline lattice in the atmosphere began to glow, its light spreading outward in shimmering waves. "It's working," Kieran breathed, their voice filled with awe. The obelisk hummed with newfound energy, its light steady and warm. The ground around it seemed to come alive, the frost melting to reveal patches of green beneath the snow. Thane stepped back, their face illuminated by the artifact's glow. "We've restored the balance," Thane said quietly, "but this is only the beginning." Kieran nodded. "Now comes the hard part, keeping it." The artifact stood at the centre of the valley, its light casting an ethereal glow over the snow-dusted ground. Kieran and Thane gazed up at it, their breath misting in the cold air. Around them, the villagers assembled in a cautious semicircle, their expressions a mixture of awe, fear, and guarded hope. Above, the crystalline lattice in the sky shimmered faintly, its glow pulsing in rhythm with the obelisk below. "It's holding," Kieran said, their voice barely audible over the quiet hum of the artifact. "The energy flow is stable, but this is just the beginning. If we don't maintain the balance, it'll collapse again." Thane nodded, their face lined with tension. "And now we must show the village what this balance means." Marek stepped forward, his arms crossed tightly against his chest. "So that's it," he said, his voice sharp. "You've tethered this thing to the land, and we're supposed to live under its mercy? What happens when it decides we've taken too much again?" "It's not about mercy," Kieran said firmly. "It's about understanding. The artifact isn't punishing us, it's reacting to what we take without giving back. The storms weren't a curse, they were a warning." "And you think the village will just accept that?" Marek shot back. "How do you expect us to survive if we have to share its power?" Thane stepped forward, their presence calm but commanding. "We survived long before the artifact came to us, Marek. It gave us prosperity, yes, but we have grown dependent on it. Now it is time to learn how to thrive alongside it, not at its expense." Marek's scowl deepened, but he fell silent as more villagers began to murmur their agreement. Thane turned back to the crowd, their voice carrying over the uneasy murmurs. "This is not a surrender," they said. "It is a partnership. The artifact's light will guide us, but we must guide ourselves. It will not carry the burden of our survival alone." Over the following weeks, the village began the painstaking process of adapting to their new reality. With the artifact's power redirected outward, the storms receded, revealing a landscape transformed. Patches of green began to appear beneath the melting snow, and the rivers swelled with fresh, clear water. The villagers worked together to rebuild, their efforts blending ingenuity and tradition in ways that hadn't been seen for generations. Kieran became a reluctant leader in this transition, their knowledge of the artifact proving invaluable as they worked to maintain the delicate energy flow. They devised systems to monitor its stability, training a group of villagers to understand its intricate mechanisms. Though Kieran was often impatient and brusque, their dedication earned them a measure of respect, even from those who had once doubted them. Thane, too, found their role shifting. They moved among the villagers with a steady presence, mediating disputes and offering guidance as the community struggled to adapt. Their faith, once seen as rigid and unyielding, now became a source of strength, a reminder that tradition could evolve without being abandoned. "You're good at this," Kieran said one evening, watching Thane settle an argument over resource distribution with practiced ease. Thane smiled faintly. "And you're better at this than you think. You've brought the village together in ways I never could," Kieran snorted. "I just fix things. You're the one who keeps people from tearing each other apart." "Perhaps," Thane said, their tone thoughtful. "But Perhaps we've both learned that fixing things and guiding people aren't so different. Not everyone adapted easily. Marek and a small group of traditionalists continued to resist, their distrust of the artifact and its changes simmering beneath the surface. One night, Kieran caught Marek near the art, a heavy hammer in hand, and anger burning in his eyes. "Don't do it," Kieran said, stepping out of the shadows. Marek turned, his jaw tight. "You think you've saved us, but all you've done is make us slaves to that thing." "It's not slavery," Kieran said, their voice calm but firm. "It's survival. You think destroying it will bring back the world you knew? It won't. It'll only destroy everything we've built." For a long moment, Marek hesitated, the hammer trembling in his grip. Finally, he dropped it, the metal clanging loudly against the ground. "I hope you're right," Marek muttered, his voice low, "because if you're wrong, it'll be on your head." Kieran watched as Marek walked away, their chests tight with a mixture of relief and unease. The balance they'd restored was fragile, and it would take vigilance to maintain it. But as they looked up at the glowing obelisk and the shimmering lattice above, Kieran felt a flicker of hope. Years later, the village thrived in ways that once seemed impossible. The storms had become a distant memory, and the villagers had learned to coexist with the artifact, treating it not as a tool or a deity, but as a partner. Kieran and Thane's efforts became the foundation of a new way of life, one that blended faith and reason, tradition and progress. Standing together at the edge of the valley, Kieran and Thane watched the village below, its lights glowing warmly in the fading twilight. "Do you think it'll last?" Kieran asked quietly. Thane's smile was faint but resolute. "As long as we remember the balance, I believe it will." Kieran nodded, their gaze fixed on the artifact's steady glow. The journey had been fraught with challenges, but for the first time in their life, they felt a sense of peace. The balance had been restored, and with it, the promise of a future worth fighting for. Thanks for listening. If the story stuck with you, come back next time for another journey.